If you loved seeing justice served today, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe for more epic real-life stories. Got your own crazy HOA story? Drop it in the comments. We might just feature it in a future video. And remember, when you stand up for what's right, you inspire others to do the same. See you in the next one. A fist hammered against the front door, rattling the glass pane so hard Jason almost dropped his coffee. The warm scent of dark roast filled the kitchen, the gentle whir of the solar inverter, a steady hum in the background. Morning sun poured across his newly landscaped front yard, catching on the sleek black panels installed just a week before. He wasn't expecting visitors, definitely not ones this aggressive. Setting the mug down, Jason wiped his hands on his jeans and approached the door. Another thunderous knock echoed through the house. All right, he muttered, twisting the deadbolt. The door swung open to reveal a woman standing stiffly on the porch, clutching a clipboard like it was a weapon. Mid-50s, iron-gray hair sprayed into an immovable helmet, sunglasses perched imperiously on her nose despite the early hour. A gold pin on her lapel flashed in the sunlight. HOA President. Jason Miller, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to slice through sheet metal. Yeah, he answered, a little wary now. I'm Mrs. Caldwell. I'm here regarding a serious violation of community standards, she said, thrusting the clipboard at him like it might bite. Jason blinked down at it, scanning the aggressive language. Notice of fine. Unauthorized modification. Solar panels. You've got to be kidding, Jason said, voice catching between disbelief and a growing ember of anger. Mrs. Caldwell sniffed, as if the mere suggestion of humor was offensive. Those... She gestured disdainfully toward the panels gleaming above. The garage are an eyesore. They ruin the visual harmony of Maple Ridge Estates. Jason stepped back slightly, resisting the urge to laugh. They're high-efficiency panels. They're clean, they're modern, they'll even boost property values. That's not the point, she said sharply. They were installed without prior architectural review approval, which is a violation of our bylaws. You'll find the daily fine schedule attached. It begins today. $500 a day? Jason read aloud, stunned. If you refuse to remove them promptly, further legal action will be pursued, Mrs. Caldwell added, smiling thinly, like she'd just offered him a homemade pie instead of a threat. Jason took a slow breath, forcing calm into his voice. I followed the county permits process. Solar installations are protected under state law. HOAs can't ban them. Maybe in theory, she said, drawing out the words, but in this community, we have standards. Those panels aren't just ugly. They're disruptive. For a second, Jason could only stare at her, feeling the heat rising in his chest. The panels represented months of planning, an investment in his home's future, and frankly, the planet's. And now, because of one power-hungry busybody, he was being treated like a criminal. He bit the inside of his cheek and stepped back, folding his arms. I'll be reaching out to the HOA board directly, he said, voice clipped. You're welcome to, Mrs. Caldwell said, already turning on her heel. But I assure you, the board stands with me. We take the integrity of our community very seriously. She marched down the steps, the heels of her pumps clicking like a metronome of disdain. Jason watched her go, a sour taste blooming in his mouth. Later that evening, Jason found himself at the HOA's emergency meeting, the fluorescent lights of the community center buzzing overhead. A handful of neighbors filled the folding chairs, murmuring in low tones. Some shot him sympathetic glances. Others avoided his eyes altogether. Mrs. Caldwell sat at the head table, flanked by 3 bored-looking board members. She tapped her manicured nails on the table, smiling like a cat fat on cream. As many of you are aware, she began, projecting, her voice with the authority of a small-town mayor, one of our residents has made a regrettable modification to his property. It threatens the aesthetic cohesion we've all worked so hard to preserve. Jason rose from his chair, heart hammering. With respect, he said, the words slicing through the room, the state law protects my right to install solar panels. The HOA can suggest guidelines, but they can't unreasonably restrict them. A titter ran through the audience. Mrs. Caldwell's smile tightened. Jason, she said, her voice laced with syrupy condescension, you're new to this community. We understand your enthusiasm, But you must understand, we have rules here. You can't just do whatever you want. I didn't just do whatever I wanted, he said, struggling to keep his voice even. I followed the law. You're imposing fines to intimidate me. It's not right. Mrs. Caldwell tilted her head, as if regarding a particularly disobedient child. You're welcome to take it up with the appeals committee, she said sweetly. But know this. Maple Ridge Estates was founded on the principle of visual harmony. If you can't respect that, perhaps this isn't the community for you. The words landed like a slap. A ripple of whispers surged through the room. Jason sat down, slowly, pulse roaring in his ears. It wasn't just about the panels anymore. It was about control, about being pushed out, about being told he didn't belong. As the meeting droned on, Jason's mind spun with anger and disbelief. This wasn't what he signed up for when he bought his home. He had believed in the idea of a neighborhood where people looked out for each other, not policed each other over imagined infractions. Mrs. Caldwell called the meeting to a close with a smug smile. Jason stood up stiffly, his fists clenching and unclenching at his sides. As he turned to leave, he caught her whispering to one of the board members, loud enough for him to hear. Maybe next time he'll think twice before junking up the neighborhood. Jason stepped out into the cool night air, the street lamps casting long shadows across the quiet streets. Overhead, the solar panels gleamed faintly in the moonlight, silent, powerful, defiant. He wasn't about to back down. Not now. Not ever. Jason barely slept that night. His mind churned with anger and humiliation, every word from Mrs. Caldwell replaying on a loop. He stared at the ceiling as the hours dragged past, the faint hum of the solar inverter through the walls, somehow more comforting than the silence. By dawn he wasn't tired. He was determined. Coffee in hand, Jason sat at the kitchen table with his laptop open, pages of state regulations and HOA bylaws scattered around him. The sun rose outside, painting the sky with ribbons of pink and gold, the panels on his roof catching the first light. Somewhere deep down he could feel a thread of hope. If the law was on his side, he could fight this. He had to. Hours bled away as he dug deeper. The state's Solar Rights Act was clear. No homeowners association could impose restrictions that effectively prohibited solar installations. Yet, Maple Ridge Estates had crafted its own labyrinth of architectural guidelines, carefully, worded to appear neutral while squeezing anyone who dared step out of line. Jason scribbled notes furiously. There had to be a way through. 3 days later, the situation exploded. Without warning, the HOA posted a public notice at the community entrance, a laminated sheet stapled under the Welcome to Maple Ridge sign. Jason saw it while jogging and froze, sweat chilling on his skin as he read. Attention residents. Certain individuals have installed unauthorized structures, degrading the appearance and value of our neighborhood. We ask for your patience as we enforce community standards to restore order and dignity to Maple Ridge. No. Names were mentioned, but the implication was a hammer blow, public shaming courtesy of Mrs. Caldwell. As Jason walked home, passing neighbor after neighbor who avoided his gaze, the pit in his stomach deepened. A few whispered behind hedges. Others openly stared, some with pity, some with annoyance. His own front yard, once a source of pride, now felt like a spotlight shining down on him. He thought about confronting Caldwell again, but what would be the point? She wasn't acting alone. The board was in her pocket, and they clearly saw him as a troublemaker, not a neighbor. That evening, Jason drafted an official appeal letter and delivered it to the HOA office, sliding the envelope through the mail, slot with shaking hands. He even included a copy of the state statute, highlighting the clauses that protected solar installations. It was measured, respectful, airtight. The response came 2 days later in the form of an email, so curt it barely qualified as professional. Your appeal has been reviewed and denied. The HOA's authority to regulate property modifications remains intact. Fines continue to accrue. Non-compliance may result in further legal action, including property liens. Jason stared at the screen, in disbelief. They hadn't even addressed the law he cited. It wasn't ignorance. It was arrogance. A sense of helpless fury boiled in his chest. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about being steamrolled by people who believed rules only existed to serve their power. The next board meeting was scheduled for the following week. Jason considered attending, but imagined the same hollow smiles, the same veiled threats. Mrs. Caldwell would act like she was doing him a favor, while her lackeys nodded dutifully. What was the point of arguing with people who had already decided he was the villain? He needed another strategy. But what? One evening Jason sat alone on his porch, the cicadas buzzing lazily in the humid air. The sunset lit the sky on fire, orange, purple, gold. His panels gleamed proudly overhead, oblivious to the war being waged around them. A group of kids biked past, their laughter echoing down the street. Behind them, Mr. Sanders, an older neighbor with a garden that could have been on the cover of a magazine, waved as he walked his dog. Jason nodded back, surprised. "Don't let them get to you," Mr. Sanders called out, pausing at the curb. "Some of us think what you did is smart." Jason blinked, unsure if he heard correctly. Sanders shrugged, tugging gently on his dog's leash. "Solar panels are the future. Caldwell's just mad she didn't think of it first." He gave a conspiratorial wink and continued down the street, leaving Jason staring after him. For the first time in days, Jason felt something shift inside him. He wasn't entirely alone. There were cracks in Caldwell's iron grip, small ones maybe, but cracks nonetheless. Still, he knew one thing. If he went back to the next meeting unprepared, all the support in the world wouldn't save him. Caldwell controlled the rules. She controlled the board, and if she had her way, she'd control him too. No, he needed something more powerful than appeals. He needed to hit her where it hurt. He glanced at the thick folder of HOA documents he'd pulled from the website earlier. Somewhere in there, buried among the endless clauses and signatures, there had to be something Caldwell didn't want anyone to find, some mistake, some violation of her own making. Jason picked up the folder, his fingers tightening around the edges. It was time to dig deeper, deeper than any of them ever expected. Jason's world became paperwork. For the next several nights he sat hunched over the kitchen table, the only sound the low shuffle of pages and the occasional scrape of his coffee mug. The HOA documents were a dense forest of legal jargon, double talk and endless regulations. Caldwell's fingerprints were all over it, every amendment, every clause, every fine-tuned threat designed to keep residents compliant. But somewhere in the mess, Jason knew there had to be a flaw. He pored over meeting minutes, financial reports, and annual budgets until his eyes blurred. The numbers didn't quite add up. Year after year, fees rose, projects were approved, and yet somehow the community park renovation, budgeted 3 times over, was still pending. Jason's fingers tightened around the page. It wasn't just negligence. It looked like embezzlement. Heart pounding, Jason double-checked the figures, cross-referencing public tax records with HOA statements. The more he looked, the uglier it became. Mrs. Caldwell had authorized landscaping projects to a company called Silverstone Management. On paper, a legitimate vendor, but a quick search revealed Silverstone's listed address was a UPS store, and its registered agent, a name Jason recognized instantly, Caldwell's nephew. A bitter laugh escaped his lips. She wasn't just a bully. She was dirty. The next morning, Jason made some calls, careful to keep his voice low and his questions casual. Within a few hours, he confirmed what he suspected. Silverstone Management had no real office, no employees besides Caldwell's relatives, and no legitimate contracts outside Maple Ridge Estates. It was a slush fund, siphoning money under the community's nose. Jason sat back, the weight of the discovery sinking in. This wasn't about solar panels. This was about control. And the cash that came with it. He knew he couldn't take her down alone. He needed leverage. He needed exposure. Something Caldwell couldn't bury with a smile and a threat. Scrolling through his contacts, Jason found a local journalist's number, someone who specialized in HOA corruption stories. The last thing Caldwell would expect was her shady dealings, splashed across headlines. When Jason explained what he found, the reporter, a sharp-tongued woman named Marcy, practically purred with excitement. "You've got receipts?" she asked. "Better," Jason said, forwarding the neatly compiled evidence. "Minutes, budgets, tax filings, it's all here." Good, Marcy said. Let's make some noise. They devised a plan. Marcy would run a story exposing Caldwell's financial misconduct, time to drop just before the next HOA meeting. Jason would present his findings to the board at the same meeting, backed by copies he would distribute to every resident. They wouldn't be able to cover it up. Not in time. The days leading up to the meeting stretched tight with tension. Jason mowed his lawn, washed his car, kept to himself. Neighbors still threw wary glances his way, but Jason didn't mind. Let them wonder. Let Caldwell think she had. 1. The night of the meeting, Jason wore his best button-down and jeans, casual but sharp. He clutched a thick manila envelope under one arm, his heart thudding heavily against his ribs. The community center buzzed louder than before, the rows of folding chairs packed full. Even residents who usually skipped these tedious gatherings had shown up. Whispers swirled through the room, rumors bubbling just beneath the surface. Something was coming. They all felt it. Mrs. Caldwell presided over the meeting like a queen addressing her court, wearing a bright red blazer and an expression of serene authority. She didn't even glance Jason's way. "We'll begin tonight," she said, voice crisp, by addressing ongoing compliance violations. Jason rose before she could launch into another sanctimonious lecture. "Point of order," he said loudly, holding up the envelope. Heads turned. Caldwell's lips pressed into a thin line. "I have documents relevant to the financial operations of this HOA," Jason continued, projecting his voice until it filled the room. "Documents that show serious misconduct, misuse of funds and conflicts of interest involving current board leadership." A stunned silence fell across the audience. Caldwell recovered quickly, her voice brittle. "That's completely inappropriate." "Mr. Miller, if you have concerns, there are proper channels." "I tried those channels," Jason cut in smoothly. "They ignored state law to fine me for installing solar panels. But this concerns everyone here. Every homeowner who's paid their dues, trusting it was being used properly." He opened the envelope and began distributing copies to the nearest rows. The papers fanned outward like wildfire, hands grabbing eagerly, faces paled, eyebrows shot up. A low murmur built into something heavier, angrier. Caldwell rose from her seat, her face flushing crimson. "This meeting is adjourned," she barked, but it was too late. The door to the community center swung open and Marcy entered, a cameraman trailing behind her, lens already rolling. A few residents gasped. Marcy's voice rang out, crisp and merciless. "Mrs. Caldwell, care to comment on allegations of financial misconduct, fraudulent vendor contracts, and potential embezzlement?" Caldwell stiffened as though struck. Her mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Flashes popped as Marcy snapped photos, documenting everything. The room buzzed with electricity now, not fear, not control, something wilder and sharper. Outrage. Jason watched Caldwell falter, the power draining from her like a punctured balloon. For months, she had ruled Maple Ridge with an iron fist. Now, under the harsh light of exposure, she looked small. Pathetic. Caldwell stumbled through a half-hearted denial, but it was clear nobody believed her. Neighbors edged away. Conversations, sparking furiously around the room. The board members looked lost, glancing at each other in panicked silence. Jason folded his arms, feeling the tide shift. Finally, the reckoning had begun. The meeting dissolved into chaos. Residents clustered in heated knots, voices overlapping, anger swelling like a storm. Jason stayed where he was, grounded in the center of it all, calm while the world around him finally cracked open. Caldwell's red blazer was easy to spot as she barreled toward the exit, a board member trailing after her. Papers clutched to his chest like a shield. Marcy's cameraman caught every desperate movement, every panicked glance. Caldwell's carefully curated facade was unraveling in real time, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Outside, under the harsh glare of the community center's parking lot lights, Caldwell made one last stand. "This is slander," she snapped at Marcy, her voice brittle with desperation. "This man is a disgruntled homeowner. None of these allegations are true." Marcy raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Disgruntled or not, the documents speak for themselves. Misappropriated. Funds, fraudulent contracts. Your nephew's name on vendor filings. Care to explain that?" Caldwell opened her mouth to respond, but Jason stepped forward, his voice cutting through the humid night air. "You tried to silence me with fines, public shaming, threats," he said, keeping his tone even, but unmistakably cold. "But you made one mistake, Caldwell. You thought you were above the rules you forced on everyone else." A hush fell over the crowd that had followed them outside. Neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid him now stood behind him, arms crossed, eyes sharp, with fury. For a moment, Caldwell simply stood there, trembling, caught between outrage and fear. Then, without another word, she shoved past the camera and fled to her car. Tires squealed against asphalt as she sped away into the night, her empire crumbling in her wake. Jason exhaled slowly, the knot in his chest loosening for the first time. In what felt like months, the following days unfolded like a slow, satisfying sunrise. Marcy's article hit the front page of the local paper, complete with side-by-side photos of Caldwell and the damning financial documents. HOA members held an emergency meeting without her, this time packed with angry homeowners demanding accountability. An independent audit was ordered. Caldwell resigned before the auditors even finished unearthing the full extent of the corruption. By the end of the week, she was stripped of her position, her reputation in ruins. Word around the neighborhood was that her family had gone silent, her house listed for sale by owner, though no one could imagine who would dare buy it. Jason received an official letter from the newly elected interim board, apologizing for the unjust fine and acknowledging that his solar panels were fully compliant with state law. The fine was rescinded, his record cleared, but the real victory came the next Saturday. The new board hosted a community barbecue, a symbolic fresh start. Jason showed up late, unsure what to expect. Would the neighbors resent him for stirring up so much trouble, even if it had been justified? As he approached the park, he caught sight of Mr. Sanders waving him over to a picnic table, already half filled with smiling faces. Someone shoved a paper plate, piled high with ribs, into his hands. A little boy darted past, a makeshift cardboard, solar panel strapped to his back like a superhero cape. Jason laughed, a full, deep laugh he hadn't heard from himself in weeks. Mrs. Green, who had once petitioned for stricter lawn aesthetics, clapped him on the shoulder. "You did good, son," she said gruffly. "Took guts." A ripple of agreement followed. Nods, smiles, raised plastic cups. Jason sat down among them, the tension in his shoulders finally dissolving. It wasn't just about the solar panels. It was about standing up when no one else could, about refusing to be cowed by bullies wrapped in polite smiles and paper authority. The sun dipped low in the sky, throwing long golden beams across the tables, catching the metal roofs and the panels, now proudly gleaming on several more homes. Jason smiled into the light, feeling the warmth on his skin. He wasn't just a troublemaker anymore. He was the reason change happened. And as he tucked into his plate of ribs, he spotted a new sign hanging over the park's entrance. Maple Ridge Estates, powered by community, powered by the sun. A quiet chuckle escaped him. Ironic, he thought. Caldwell had tried to shame him for those panels. Now they were a badge of pride. He leaned back on the bench, savoring the moment, the delicious, slow satisfaction of justice done right. No fanfare, no grand speeches, just a community healing itself, brick by brick, powered by the truth. Somewhere. In the distance, a neighbor's stereo kicked on, and Here Comes the Sun played lazily through the evening air. Jason raised his cup in an invisible toast. Here comes the sun, indeed.